Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So welcome to our third installment of a foundation in Pali, building a foundation in Pali. Now, we're going to start with our Pali textbook in this class. The textbook that we're going to use is called An Easy Introduction to Pali. It seems to be written anonymously, and it's available online. We'll put a link here. So this textbook gives a very clear explanation of the points of Pali grammar. For somebody who knows Pali grammar, it is quite a bit simpler than some of the other textbooks, but it's quite thorough and it can be quite daunting for the beginner. So for that reason, I've tried to extract the main points, and we're going to present the main points here and then go through some of the exercises from chapter 1. So we'll go through chapter by chapter and we'll try to schedule some Zoom sessions for people who are finding it difficult to follow along. Then we can have a Q&A and try to clear up any problems. So the first point, nouns in Pali undergo certain changes depending on their function in a sentence. This process is called declension. The second point, Pali nouns are declined according to gender, masculine, feminine, and neuter. It is not easy to predict grammatical gender of a word based on its meaning, though certain trends can be discerned. Okay, so for those of you who've studied French or Spanish, for example, you know about grammatical gender. As I just said, that it's not the same as like the natural gender of something. So like a woman, it's possible that a word for woman might actually have a neuter gender or a masculine gender. In principle, such a thing is possible, but it's not that common, or not as common as the genders to be matching. 3. Within each gender, there are several word endings, each with its own set of declensions. 4. The most important declension is that of the masculine nouns ending in A. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, masculine nouns that end in the letter A. And when we say they have a certain declension, it means that there are certain forms it takes in a sentence according to their function. 5. The nominative form of a noun is used for the subject of a sentence. A second noun adjacent to the first, also in the nominative form, denotes an attribute of the first. For example, who is or which is. It can be translated as who is or which is. We'll see some examples later, but this is the attributive function. It's a noun acting as an adjective, you can say. It is possible to make a sentence in Pali without a verb, merely placing two nominatives adjacent to each other. In this case, the verb to be in Pali, hoti, is implied, and the sentence equates the two nouns. So an English example of this would be if you have two nouns, dog and spaniel. So if you imagine they were adjacent to each other, dog, spaniel. And in English we could make the sentence, the dog is a spaniel. But in Pali there's no need for those extra words. You could just put dog and spaniel next to each other. However, it's a little more complicated than that because the nouns have undergone certain modification to show that they can be placed together as a compound or as an adjective and a primary noun. The accusative case, so this is the second of the declensions that we're talking about. We had the nominative case and the accusative case is the other one we're looking at today. The accusative case may represent the patient of a sentence, which receives the result of an active verb. It may express the goal of motion or denote an attribute of another accusative or represent a point in time. So we'll see examples of those. It will sound a little bit abstract at first. 8. Verbs in Pali have a root, a stem, and a suffix. Sometimes they also take one or more prefixes. 9. There are 7 conjugation groups in Pali, but these will be introduced later. So the verbs, it's a little bit theoretical the way that the verbs are formed. It's highly irregular. And the way that we study Pali in English medium is a little bit different than the traditional way. So for example, if you're following the Katyayana system of grammar, they'll have a bit of a different explanation. However, the results are the same. So some of the categorizations might seem a bit strange, but perhaps they might be more meaningful if you're studying the grammar like a different grammatical system of analysis. So 10. Sentence structure is less fixed than in English, but sentences commonly take the form of subject, object, verb. So sometimes in Pali, especially in Pali verse, you can get something that looks a bit like a word salad. But because the grammar is so complicated, there are a lot of different markers that show you what things will go together. And so you won't get as lost as you might in an English sentence. And so it's quite allowable. But you'll find that when you're reading Pali prose, that there are only certain variations amongst the many allowable variations that are commonly used. However, again, in verse, things can be mixed up to fit the meter or for a poetic effect. Okay, so let's go on to our vocabulary. Remember, we're looking at we're looking at nouns that are masculine and ending in A. And we're looking at the present tense of verbs. Buddha. Buddha means Buddha. Talaka. Talaka means lake. Dharaka. Dharaka means child. Vihara. Vihara means monastery. Dhamma. Dhamma means the Buddha's teaching, or it can mean the Dhamma. As we say in English, we've adopted this word. Putta. Putta means son. Gama. Gama means village. Bhupala. Bhupala means king. Gata. Gata means pot. Sikkaka. Sikkaka means learner. Sadala. Sadala means meadow. Sakata. Sakata means cart. Savaka. Savaka means disciple. Pasana. Pasana means rock or stone. Yoda. Yoda means warrior. So those are the nouns. And when we conjugate the nouns, we're looking at the nominative case and the accusative case. So any of those words can be modified to form the nominative singular by adding O. So for example, Buddha becomes Buddho. And in the plural, by adding a long A, Buddha. And in the accusative, by the singular we add ang, so buddhang. And then for the plural we add a, buddhe. So we're going to look at this in the exercises in just a moment. So for the verbs, from the root dav, we have the verb in the present tense davati, which means runs or is running. From the root vand, we have vandati, which means salutes or is saluting. From the root dhov, we have dhovati, washes or is washing. From the root rak, we have rakkati, which means protects or is protecting. From the root vad, we have vadati, which means speaks or declares, or speaking, is declaring. So if you go through the chapter in the book, in the textbook, you have a better explanation. I've really tried to extract it down to the most basic points that are necessary to look at the exercises. Question 1. Buddho vadati. So remember, we said that a masculine noun with an O at the end, then it should be in the nominative case. So we know that this is the subject. And vadati, we said, is to speak. So the Buddha is speaking, or the Buddha speaks. Dhammo nare rakkati. So later when you're doing these exercises, there'll be many more declensions to look at. In this case, it's a little more simple. You only know a few. So you see an O at the end, you know it's a masculine, and it's in the nominative case. And we see the A form, the E at the end, which is making an A sound. And this is going to be an accusative plural. So Buddho, so the Buddha, Dhammo, the Dhamma, nare, men, rakkati, and this means protects, so it protects, so the Dhamma protects men. Sa gate dovati. So we didn't study sa yet. Sa means she. So sa gate. So again, we have accusative, which means this is going to be the patient or the object of the sentence, and it's plural. Dovati. So she washes the pots. Savaka sakatang dhavanti. So we see the A at the end. Savaka. So the disciples. This is nominative plural. Sakatang. So remember we said the accusative can be used for the goal of motion. And so that's what's happening here. It's the accusative singular. So the cart. Dhavanti. So they run. The disciples run to the cart. Now for the verbs, if it's in ati, it's he, she, or it does something. If it's anti, it's they. It's the plural. Yoda bhupalang vandanti. The warriors. So again, this is nominative plural because it's an a. Gamang. Nara. Where are we? Yoda bhupalang vandati. So the warriors salute the king. So because it's they, we get anti, vandanti. And then the king, bhupalang. So because it's the accusative. And so he's receiving their veneration. Bhupalo, so now we have the nominative form. So now the king is doing something. Gamang rakkati. So the king is protecting the village, singular accusative. It's an ang. Sakate nara dovanti. So here actually they've reversed the normal order, but we know because the A at the end of sakata becomes sakate, so we know this is accusative plural. So that this is going to be the object. And then we have the men, nara, this is nominative plural. So the men do something to the carts, and then the verb here is dovanti. And so this is another clue. So this is a plural here, because it's an anti, and so they're washing the carts. The men wash the carts, or the men are washing the carts. Nara darake sikkake rakhanti. So here we have So nara is going to be the subject. We have the a, nominative. And then darake sikkake. So remember we said that if we have the accusative next to another accusative, then the second accusative is going to be describing the first accusative. So the children who are learners. So the men do something to the children who are learners, and here they protect them, rakanti. So the men protect the children who are learners. Sikkaka savaka buddhang sunanti. So this is a similar situation. We're getting the attribute, but this time in the nominative, because it's the plural. The a is giving us a nominative plural. So the learners who are disciples, buddham, so accusative, sunanti, they listen to the Buddha. Dhammam buddho vadati. So here the nominative is Buddha, because we have buddho. And then the accusative is ang, dhammam vadati. So the Buddha is speaking on the Dhamma. The Buddha is preaching the Dhamma. Now, translating from English to Pali is something that you might not do that often, but it's a good exercise in the process of learning the grammar. So we'll just go through it quickly. So the question is, the Buddha goes to the village. So we know that the goal of motion is going to be in the accusative. And then the person who goes should be in the nominative. So here we have singular, the Buddha, so buddho, to the village, gamang, and goes, gacchati. Buddho, gamang, gacchati. The Buddha preaches the Dhamma. And again, we can sort of mix up the words here, but I'm just going to use the subject object verb version. It's a little bit easier to stick with that when we're doing our own sentences. The Buddha preaches the Dhamma, so buddho, right? We have nominative. Dhammang, accusative. Vadati, speaks. Vadati. There's some other words actually that could be used for this. Deseti also. The learners are going to the monastery. So we want a plural here. And learner is sikkaka, but here we want a nominative plural, so it should end in a. Sikkaka, and then we want them to go to the monastery, so viharam. And then because it's plural, we need an anti form. Gacchanti. The king is saluting the men who are warriors. So the king is doing something, so he gets the nominative case, and it's singular, so bhupalo, and the men who are warriors, so warrior is yoda, and then we want the accusative plural, because it's a group of them, and then they are the object, so yode, but it says that the men who are warriors, so we should have the word men before the warriors. So nara is men, and then here in the accusative plural, nare. So finally we have bhupalo, nare, yode, vandati. The warriors see the king. So here we have warriors as in the nominative plural. So it should be an a, so yoda, and the king is accusative, bhupalam. And then to see here is pasati. A child washes the pots. So we want the child is nominative, darako, pots. In accusative plural, gate, dovanti, because it's going to be, it goes with the plural. I'm sorry, it goes with the singular, dharako, I said. So we get dovati. So dharako, gate, dovati. Goes with the singular because it matches the actor. The actor is the child. Even though Pots is receiving action, it's plural. The men are going to the lake. So again, we get the men. We want the nominative plural. So that will be nara, and then to the lake, talakang, because accusative, remember, for goal of motion. Oh, sorry, not talakang, talakang. Sometimes English speakers get the long and short A's mixed up. Talakang, and then are going, gachanti, the men are going to the lake. The king protects the disciples. So again, nominative singular, bupalo, and then the disciples, accusative plural, savake, and then the king, because it's only one king, we want a singular noun, a singular verb, rakati, protects. So bupalo, savake, rakati. The learners hear the Dhamma. So the learners, we want nominative plural, sikkha. And then they want to learn the Dhamma, so we get ang, dhammang, accusative singular. And learn here, sorry, not learn here, sunanti, because it's a group of them, savaka. Sikkha, the learners. They, the warriors, are going to the village. So they is te, t, which is te, te, yoda. So this is like another attributive, except for here we're using a pronoun. Te yoda, they, the warriors, gamang, gachanti. So the ang here is indicating goal of motion, and gachanti, because it's plural, te yoda, they, the warriors, is plural, and gachati is he goes, but gachanti is they go. So those are the sentences. We have 20 sentences, and I gave a very brief overview of the grammar. So I hope that this was helpful. I encourage you to go through the chapter yourselves and to solve all of these questions again without using the video, and see if you can do it easily. Hopefully it will be very easy to solve them now. And if you're having trouble with it, then please let Sister Janice know. We'll try to schedule a Zoom meeting sometime if people are having questions. People are starting to have questions about the grammar. And next week we'll move on to chapter 2. So I wish that your Pali studies may go swiftly. You may be happy, healthy, peaceful, and content, and swiftly attain the peace of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.